Right.
My name is Casey First. I'm Frameline's Executive Director.
And I'm Ira Sachs. I'm the co-writer and the director of Keep the Lights On.
And I'm Zach Booth. I'm one of the actors from Keep the Lights On.
Great. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for being here and bringing your wonderful film to Frameline. My first question I have for you is, the theme or tagline for Frameline36 this year is Find Your Story.
Mm-hmm.
What story are you highlighting in Keep the Lights On?
Well, the story of Keep the Lights On is about two men who are in a long-term relationship for 10 years in New York City, and the kind of ups and downs and ins and outs and the things that they face. The film, it's interesting that you say find your story. Our motto is to tell your story. Mm-hmm. And I think in a way, the film is a call to action on some level for gay people and anyone who's in a relationship or who's maybe held some part of themselves back or held themselves in secret, to begin to share those secrets with other people, to keep the lights on, to actually live a transparent life. The film is about two men who were not able to do that,
right,
and the troubles that came from that. So we're with you. Find your story and tell it.
And tell it, yeah. In creating this film, is there anything notable or memorable you might want to talk about in terms of the making of the film? Anything, not necessarily anything embarrassing, but something interesting or of interest that people would find?
Well, I think for me, I was intent upon making a movie in which sex was central to the story.
Great,
and sexuality was central to the story, and that somehow the movie wouldn't suddenly shift gears whenever the characters were engaged in sex. Mm-hmm. So there's a nakedness, I think, both physically and emotionally, to the performances in the film. But technically, we had to figure out how to shoot sex, and I think though the film is not pornographic, it's not explicit, it is open. And the bodies are there, and the actions are there. And I think one of the things I did learn, and I was given this advice before we started shooting, was to shoot the sex scenes very early on. So the first sex scene in the film, which is just a few minutes in, we shot on the second day of shooting. So everyone is new to each other, and suddenly the actors are naked, and the camera's rolling, and the crew, in a way, particularly because these two actors, both Tor and Zach, are very comfortable with their bodies, and with sexuality, I would say. And I think that really gave us, as a group of people making a movie, it liberated us. The rest of the movie was kind of, was free.
And may I ask, what is the wisdom of shooting the sex scenes early?
Is to make it not something that the crew is anticipating with fear, or the actors, but to realize that it's just another form of activity that's going to be part of the film.
Got it.
And the film is really about sexuality in so many ways, that I think as a group of people, and also specifically as a group, we would make a film about a gay story that brought a commonality of acceptance or ease into the language of how we as a group were going to make this movie.
Right.
To sort of go further with what Ira's talking about, the thing that I most remember from the whole experience is that second day. And Tor and I love to laugh about lunch the first day and sitting there. And at one point we realized that even though it was sort of a closed environment and there weren't that many members of the crew in this hot, stinky apartment in Brooklyn where we were having sex with each other, or simulating sex with each other, I should say, to be clear, that they were all standing outside and all the windows were wide open, and we were going for it, so there was some grunting and a lot of grunting, and then we sat down at lunch and we sort of settled into our chairs and we're in our robes, our underwear, and we're sort of still not really knowing each other. And then I looked at him and I said, oh my God, all of these people were standing out on the street listening to us moan like gorillas for the last 3 hours. And then we looked around and they were all like, hey. and it just, the walls sort of fall. Yeah, you become collaborators. You there's sort of hierarchy that can exist in the sort of evil side of filmmaking just falls right away. And I think a lot of that had to do with Ira setting the tone and the people that he brought on board, but also that sort of style of going right after it aggressively and not talking about something too much and just going forward and doing it.
Right.
Living in the action of it really empowered all of these people. And so they went from just being interns or second whatevers and actors who were intimidated to being members of this creative community. And that's something that for me it only really existed in theater. I don't find that as much in film. So it was this
Right.
huge gift, I think, that was given to me.
Yeah.
And part of that was Ira just saying, all right, we're going to go for it. And see
Well,
what
it was
happens.
again, the title of the film is Keep the Lights On. And that is the
Beautiful
theme
title, yeah.
of the film. It's a film about transparency.
Right.
It's also, I mean, there's a pun of, sexuality and bedroom and keeping the lights on. But really, it's a film that tries to encourage people to live with that kind of transparency. So it was important as a group of artists that we proceeded with a similar kind of non-judgment, non-fussiness around certain kinds of behavior that the film was going to depict.
Right. Yeah. Next question. What do you want the audience tonight to take away from your film?
Well, for me, screening the film at Frameline and at the Castro and with, sold out 1,400 people there in this town with a primarily gay audience, queer audience, in a way that's not the only audience I want for this film, and I
Sure,
think of
yeah.
this as a film about relationships, and a lot of people, as I've said, have responded to as such, but I did want to tell the story of what it has been for me to be a gay man of my generation in an urban city like New York, which is not so different than the life of gay people in San Francisco, and to depict our lives in a way that has, for whatever many number of reasons, not often been seen.
Right.
I don't think I'm the first to do that, but I think there's a scarcity of images of life as I've lived it as a gay man in cinema, and so to share that with this audience and hopefully give them pieces of themselves when they watch the film is exciting, and I hope that there's that connection that they have with the material.
Excellent, Zach.
I think a lot about. I'm sorry. Ira is sort of so well versed in this discussion of like queer film, and he's had these experiences in different cities showing films, and sort of knows what the audience is going to be there. And I don't have that history, that education to really know what to expect. But what I find with this film is that there's an ability really for anyone to identify with it. And through my research and sort of understanding of the recovery community, there's this idea that exists there of identifying instead of comparing. And I really think that this film allows anyone to identify as opposed to compare. If I go into a film and I don't see my face, I don't see my sexual relationship, I don't see my gender, I don't see whatever it is, that I'm not going to allow myself to let that story into my heart. And I think that, a brave audience will identify with the similarities that they see. They'll identify with the sadness, they'll identify with the joy, they'll identify with those feelings and those moments. And so I just really hope that anyone that gets to see this film allows themselves to do that, because when they do, I think they'll really see what was so brilliant about what Ira was able to accomplish with this one.
And I think one of the things that's significant about this film, as someone who did start making queer cinema when I was in my 20s and in the late 90s, when queer cinema as a movement was first starting to really pop in a certain way, was at that point I was struggling, and I think as filmmakers we were questioning issues of identity and how we were separate and how we were going to define ourselves as gay people. And I think what's kind of new about this film for me is that it's not a film about identity, it's a film about relationships. And it's a film about how we live as people, which is not to sort of denigrate the separations or these different ways that we're different than a lot of people, but I think ultimately this is a story about a relationship between two human beings, and that's how people have so far responded to it, and that's something that I think is what you're describing is happening with audiences, and that's been really great for me.
That's excellent. Yeah.
We're not so separate anymore.
Right.
So I think
yeah.
our films maybe are changing because of that as well.
Right. And one last question for both of you. So what is special to you about screening at Frameline?
Well, to me, I started out as a filmmaker in the mid-90s, and one of the first festivals I came to was Frameline. And I think what people who are not, audiences don't know about film festivals is not only are they a place for people to see gay films and gay cinema, and for the audiences, they are the support system for the filmmakers. Without those audiences, without those interactions, without that kind of continuity of experience, there would almost be no gay film. I think. I think that the absence of other support mean that the film festivals are the definition of a filmmaking community. They're not just audiences. They're the things that allow us to believe we should make these films.
Right. That's great.
I'm sort of having this experience first time around of going to film festivals and gay film festivals, really any festival.
Right.
I'd only been to Sundance once before, a few years ago, and what I love about it is that these are like the seekers. People that come to film festivals are the seekers. They're the ones that are looking for the stories, and they're looking for the good films, and they're willing to be ambitious and take the actions to show up and see a couple of failures in order to see a triumph, or however they respond to it. And so I'm excited about being here because I feel like this is going to be, a huge room, I'm told 5 minutes ago, filled with seekers and people that really want to, really want to see this story. And that just gets me so excited because I know how beautiful it is. And so I know that they'll get to have an experience that I got to have when I watched it, when I was able to sort of take my ego out of it, which took a few minutes, but we got there eventually.
Well, Ira, Zach, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today.